I just watched The King on Netflix with Timothy Chalamet, and it's a movie about war, right, back in like the 1500s. And it got me thinking, like, this was just such an unproductive time for humanity. We were putting all of our smart men into battle, and then they had a fight, and then they died. And like, just how unproductive was this period of history? Maybe it was necessary to shuffle around the resources and the balance of power between all these different people to end up to where we are today. Who knows? I would have to study it more in depth to understand the reality of the situation, but what I do know is that this will always be a challenge. What things are unproductive in society? We don't really fight wars at that level anymore. We're not sending in thousands of men and, potentially wasting some beautiful minds, really smart people, in war, and altogether wasting thousands of lives, everyone who is at war, and who dies unproductively by, moving towards a cause that might not be beneficial to humanity, if that makes sense of all of what I just said. Nowadays, we don't have that as often, but what we do have is a war of the mind, right? Winning the war of the mind is the most important battle you will face in the 20th century, in the 21st century, because attention is who you are. Let me rephrase that. What you direct your attention to is who you are, right? Your reality, your life is built around wherever you direct your eyes throughout the day. So if you're directing your eyes towards a ton of entertainment the entire day, that is technically who you are. Your experience of this world is all of this entertainment that is out there, and it's not productive. And this is why when I scroll on TikTok for hours on end, because I do it, I feel terrible. I hate it because I'm not being productive. We are meant to be productive members of society. We are meant to be pushing the human race forward. We are meant to work, to do things, positive things in the world. And so you need to win the war of the mind nowadays so that your talent, your brain, you as a person, your potential doesn't go to waste. The war of the past was losing lives to death, to warfare. The war of today is losing. Goodness, it's taking me. Is losing minds to information or entertainment. Sorry. And so to exist in this world nowadays, you can't just have an interest anymore that pulls you one way. You have to have an interest in something and a disinterest in the things that are pulling you down. So you have to have the knowledge that these things are not that good, and I have to separate myself from them. And even more than that, you have to have a disgust to these things, right? Because you have to know the reality of the situation is that if you dedicate any portion of your life, even if it's 5% of your life to entertainment over here, you're not living up to the full potential that you could be. And in turn, you're putting a middle finger to your future self because you're not capitalizing on this time. You're spending it in a way that's useless. It's like a budget. If you're spending all of your money on expenses, you're buying fancy clothes and, that nice watch. You spend money on food. You eat out all the time. You drink on the weekends. All of these things by themselves are not necessarily bad. It's okay to drink with your friends. It's okay to eat out food. It's okay to buy nice things. But if you're doing all these things together, you're spending all of your money on things that do not make you money. You're spending all of your money on expenses. There's nothing that you're paying into, especially like on top of that, if you're paying rent, right? Because rent is not paying towards ownership in a home. Rent is paying towards someone else to own the home that you're living in, right? You're paying someone else to help them unlock ownership in a home when you rent. You got to think of your time like this. If that's a terrible way to use your money, a terrible way to use your time is putting it towards things that don't pay you back. You have to set your life up as a series of stacked actions. That way, every place that you put your time builds towards the next place that you put your time. You're building equity in this time that you're putting forth in the world. You can't do that when you clock in at a 9 to 5 that's based on manual labor alone, right? And what I mean by that is like something that doesn't involve a skill. If it just requires your time, so not manual labor, if it just requires your time, you to be there, you'll never put equity into a skill set, quote unquote, that would allow you to move out of this. If you want to break out of the matrix, out of the cycle, you got to do something that kind of helps you move in that direction. This is the whole phrase of like trying to own your time, be your own CEO, all these different things. What does that actually mean? It just means take stock of your time. Realize that the things that I put my attention towards are very similar to the things that I put my money towards. If I'm always putting money towards things that don't end up paying me back in the future, I will never make a return on that money. It is gone. And so the same thing goes with your time. If I'm never building skill sets that will serve me well in the future, never building experience that will help me in a job in the future, never doing projects that will unlock, the ability to start a company or whatever it is, if I'm never stacking actions, if I'm not building towards anything, I'm not taking equity in the time that I put in. I don't own any of my time. Any of the time that I put in the past, it's gone. If that's the position that you're in, you gotta understand, you're not winning the war of the mind. Something is happening. You have to have that realization that you're in a suboptimal state. If you want to ever achieve anything, there are ways to do it. But it starts with realizing that you have to be in ownership of your time. And what that means is I have to stop letting myself be distracted by all this entertainment that exists out there. I have to be disgusted by all of it, because that's what's keeping me in this cycle. Somewhat of a related note, I don't want to get too much on a tree branch here, but if you think of a business, good businesses will spend around 20 to 30% of their operating revenue, I think, on advertising spending, right? If you were to eliminate the advertising cost in some way, for example, Mr. Beast owning a chocolate company and just promoting his own company on his videos lowers his marketing cost substantially for the company, right? Down to like 5% probably of their operating revenue. Then you've just unlocked a massive 15 to 20%, 25% even, of revenue that would have gone to marketing. Okay, and then you can do the same thing in your own life. If you have, let's say you're spending 3 hours a day in total on entertainment, and you're awake 18 hours a day, so that's 1/6. So that's about like 18%, right, of your day. We'll say it's 1/5, just to make things easy, of your day is spent on entertainment. Well, if you eliminated that, you've just unlocked 20% of your time budget. You got to think of owning your time in that way. You want to have more profit in a company in the same way you want to have more ownership of your time in your life, right? The percentage of time that you own during the day. Then you can dedicate it towards entertainment if you want to, but if you really want to build something, that time is not going towards an investment, quote unquote. It's going towards an expense. When you watch a movie or whatever it is, that won't serve you well necessarily. Maybe it will if it's, helping you with your career path, or if you find it interesting. There's a certain budget that you have to dedicate towards taking time to enjoy life, yes. But at the same time, like, if you really want to achieve massive heights, maybe for a season you have to say that part of the budget is gone. You have to eliminate it in order to unlock revenue in your time budget to put towards the things that actually matter. Because you can only go so low on the cost, if we're continuing this analogy, this metaphor, you can only go so low on the cost in a company. So there are fixed costs of things, right? And the same thing with your life. You have to, cook food. You have to sleep. There are things that you have to do that are fixed budgets. But in the same way that if you found a way to decrease your marketing spend, which is not necessarily a fixed cost, if you found a way to decrease your entertainment spend in your life, you have all this revenue that you didn't exist to you before. Out of nowhere, you've freed up this time that can be put towards something useful. And companies that have a lot of profit grow really fast because they can put money towards things that matter, right? In the same way, if you free up the time in your life, you can put your time towards things that matter. You can invest time into a project, a personal project, writing a book or making a card deck or doing a painting, whatever it is at any level, just something that will ultimately serve you well in the future. And you do this enough times, and then you free up all the time that you have to only, eventually own your own time, whatever that looks like. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be your own CEO. That could mean that you are working for someone in a career path that you want to build a skill set in long term. You're still building towards the future. You're stacking actions at that point, right? So don't necessarily feel the need that you have to become your own CEO or anything like that. You just have to be aware of your time, own it, and put it towards things that matter, and that will serve you well in the future. And that starts with winning the war on your mind. It's a difficult war, but it's the war of the 21st century. Why not us?